Hello and welcome to Second Look. I'm Lisa Joseph. It's where we discuss social issues and we try to, not just go in depth, but give countering perspectives as to what's really happening in St. Lucia. 2024 has been a remarkable year, and in some ways it has been not so great. We want to be able to talk about both sides of that coin. And what was remarkable about 2024? Of course, you are thinking it, you know it. Julian Alfred. Yeah. What a dynamic young lady. What a wonderful representation of the potential of St. Lucia, the absolute ability of St. Lucia. She personifies everything that any nation would want out of a citizen. And so for Julian Alfred, making St. Lucia proud, we are carrying out the old year, moving into a new one with such just invigoration. And I hope that all of us, as we get into 2025, we will embrace the spirit that Julian Alfred really spurred in us for 2024. And of course, as I said, not so great things happened for 2024. We are confronting the issues of crime. We're looking at the state of our young people. Of course, we have issues within the domestic space. We have individuals who are perhaps facing some tribulations, personal turmoils, and things of that sort. We want to be able to get into all of that discussion with my guest. My guest is I don't want to say veteran, I want to say a career educator, and has been an educator now for some 30 years. Wow, time really does go by, because I know her, and we'll get to talk about that a little bit. But she also describes herself as a sort of international, world citizen, and that's because she has truly lived and traveled the world and worked with in the world. She has lived and worked in Vienna, Mumbai, Germany, and even over in Kenya, and other places as well. We'll get to talk about that as we head on into the conversation. She served as our Chief Education Officer for some over 3 years. And I'm speaking about none other than Dr. Fiona Meyer Saint-Gis, and I want to say hello to you.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you so very much for welcoming me. Not only am I an international educator, I'm a Corinthian. And that's where we go back. We're both past students of the Corinth Secondary School, and we're proud of it.
And I can tell you, listen, so I'm just going to give this little personal story. So there was, as people say, a TWAT back then, a TWAT, just getting into first form. Yeah. And I met Fiona because you were head rank prefect. Assistant head.
Marlene would have been the head.
Oh, okay. But you were just everywhere. You were just so laser focused on us. And you always had this, you were strict, but you were kind, you were gentle, you always had that smile. But we knew we couldn't get anything past Fiona. Don't think that you leave in the classroom and she's outside. Where are you going? What are you doing? Does the teacher know you were here? So it didn't surprise me that you, after graduating, that you pursued a path in education. That didn't surprise me at all. So talk to me about that. When did that decision come to you that education is the passion? That's where you wanted to make your contribution.
Well, it's so interesting. Again, thank you for the opportunity. It's so interesting that at this juncture, I have to extend condolences to the family of Mr. Sylvester Phillip, who would have been my principal at the Roseau RC Combined School. So upon graduation from the Corinth Secondary, I was appointed a junior teacher at that time as of November 1990 at the Roseau RC Combined School. And the passion had always been there, because previous to that, as a young individual, I would have been behind my mom's house, doing little lessons with the children in the community and supporting them. And it was just something that I felt so passionate about, I felt compelled to do. I felt quite good in my skin in terms of working with young children. And in my case, as a very young teacher, there were students who were close to my age in terms of, at that time, your standard 6 and standard 5 students. But it has continued to be the profession, the career that I love, and I hope to be able to do until such time. So I'm very pleased with that.
Now, you can't skip past all of that experience that you gathered outside of St. Lucia.
Yeah.
You moved across to Vienna, you settled, had a life there, but you know, that really also pushed you so that you can get further qualified and then experience a whole different side to education, because I want us to talk about that next. So tell us about that decision to leave St. Lucia.
Well, that decision, again, was born out of a marriage to an Austrian gentleman and having had my children born in Vienna. But what was remarkable was that I was able to get into one of the schools called the Vienna International School, which is attached to the United Nations. And I began working there as what they call a supply teacher. And within a short space of time, I was offered a permanent position. And I can just say, sometimes we say it's luck, sometimes we say it's efficiency, sometimes we say it's competence. Other times I think it was just my willingness to learn and to embrace new ideas. So the program is called the International Baccalaureate Program. And at every instant I could get training, I was like, yeah, put my name down. So very quickly, I was able to align my philosophies, align my practices with inquiry-based learning, experiential learning, project-based work, and function well within that system. And so a lot of those experiences, even within a national school system, continue to support my practices on the ground, because I know our children are born curious. I know they have so much potential. I know they must be nurtured. Learning must be facilitated. We must give them a chance to speak out. So my international experiences, be it in India or in Tortola or project-based in Kenya, in Germany, all of these still contribute to what I do on the ground, because the foundation that I got in terms of very effective teaching and learning experiences, teacher training, came from the SAFA Lewis Community College, was born out of an experience at Roseau RC Combined School, at George Charles Secondary School. So all of that for me is always a total package, a development, but even more so, a willingness to continue to learn. We don't get to the point where we're like, oh, I've got my doctoral degree now, we're done, you know, and we sit back. No, it's never that. It is that every day we can learn, and we can learn from people that are around us. It's not only in books, but I keep myself abreast with new research and all of that.
And I opened by talking about Julian Alfred and how we should all embody that spirit and stuff. But, you know, Julian Alfreds are around the place in all spheres in St. Lucia, and you are in your own right, you know, personifying that very spirit for the last 30 years. So I know we talk about the culture shock. That happens when you leave your home, much as when it's a tiny nation, and then you are transplanted into these huge cities and you have to find your way. What was that culture shock like for you?
Well, I can speak to Austria and Vienna in particular. Obviously for me it was a very different time. My children were born soon after I got there. The German language was something I didn't know, so you have the culture shock, you have the language barrier, you have the ethnicity of people being very different to what you know, the cultural norms being also very different, from how you greet people to how you say goodbye at particular events. But what was interesting for me was just to keep learning, keep observing, keep listening. And
did you find that difficult for you, being able to just assimilate into the society and to be able to pursue your dreams? Was that difficult?
It was difficult at first, but again, I can mention the Vienna International School. Having the Vienna International School as an English-speaking school within a German-speaking country really helped me. So there were people from the United Nations from all over the world that you met. And that was the common bond, the languages and the cultural background. And then I had my life with my family and my children. And I put my will, I put my head to the wheel. It was learn German, learn to speak German, because that's how you communicate in a supermarket. And I'm very privileged that it came by, I wouldn't say easily, but consistently. So my language built up, and so the level of confidence of going out to greet somebody, to ask for something, and that would have aided me in making things easier for me, particularly with a very young family.
Did you have any wow moments throughout your career, just being in these countries and achieving at the level that you have? Wow moments came to you looking back at your life and seeing that you're from Roseau, you from Marigot,
but Roseau is the same area.
Yeah, and seeing that there you are, this little girl coming from those areas, and there you were, just being able to chart your own course.
Well, here's how I think about it, Lisa. I think that we, particularly in the Caribbean, in St. Lucia, being from Marigot, having attended the Roseau RC Combined School, we think of ourselves as small. But here's what. All of these people, wherever they come from, in whatever parts of the world, they're also part of a small area as well. Being from a European country does not make them better than us. We, yes, we mentioned Julian Alfred.
Yeah.
Yes, it is her right. It is her ability that pushed her forward. It was her dream. It was her hard work. It was her desire. It was the network that she had around her, her family, other professional coaches, and she deserves it. And so similarly, when we achieve particular things, we sit back and we say, oh, but this person was from this area. So what? Somebody else would have been from another part of Germany, of Austria, or of India, and they've achieved. So I like to think of it not as limiting ourselves. Of course we applaud the fact we have 100,000, 170,000 people, and we have an Olympic gold medalist, both gold and silver. Yes, we must applaud that. But I don't necessarily think of it as, oh, we're small and why shouldn't we? Yes, we should, because the success is there for us too. It is horizontal success. She was meant to do that, and she deserves to be applauded for it. And so I try to say to my students, my George Charles students can attest to that, walk the walk, walk tall. It's not because George Charles no longer exists, but it's close to my heart. And if Scotty hears me speaking, he'll go, oh, it's close to my heart, But it is that our children can stand tall.
Yes.
And we don't limit ourselves because we come from a small island. So that level for me has always helped me gain confidence. In my time in Vienna, I was at the United Nations hosting, the Women's Guild cultural pageants. And I was quite young then, but they were like, yeah, you can speak, here's the mic, And so these are the opportunities where we must always not limit ourselves, not be so proud that we can't listen to anybody, but be confident in our ability while also learning how to do things better.
Well, at Current Secondary, you always had the mic for the assembly, that's for sure. And certainly, too, I like to think of it, Fiona, as daring to dream.
Yeah.
And I think that is something, I think that is also in the Corinth school song as well.
One of the songs.
Yes, one of our songs. But we must dare to dream, and we must allow our children. I think that our young people are not dreaming anymore, and we'll get into that a little bit, later on down the line. But I think that the success that Corinthians, because we've plenty of us,
oh, yes,
plenty of us have gone on to do awesome things. Very, very awesome things, and that is because, and of course, Principal Keith Weeks, bless his soul, he challenged us to always want to be the best, never be someone who simply followed blindly, and even if it meant standing alone in your conviction.
Oh yes.
And he would challenge you. He would, if you had a different thought to someone else. He would challenge you to stick to that. Come and make your case.
Yep.
And I think that really served us well as we went off into the world and found our place, you know, where we have all been able to land and doing what we do and do it with love. When you return to St. Lucia, you know, having had all those experiences and having to return here, and I want you to be truthful, because the St. Lucia you left wasn't the St. Lucia you found. And that doesn't mean I'm setting you up, you know, that whether it was a bad thing, but things evolve. So when you came back home and you decided to settle, you were going to work, impressions from you, how did you now find yourself? Were you like a fish out of water all over again?
No, I wasn't a fish out of water. I think that I applied for the post of Chief Education Officer. That was 2019. It was the most difficult time for everybody all over the world. So that was just the reality. COVID hit, and things that we take for granted now were just, you know, everything was a mess. I wasn't a fish out of water, but I appreciated likewise that sometimes your experiences can be embraced by some and not necessarily embraced by others. So how do you manage this? You may look at it through one particular lens, and somebody else sees it very, very differently. And so I can just say to you that I was so blessed to have worked with education officers who I think are awesome people. I think are very good educators. I think are strong leaders. And I think more so, they love children and they want to support the development of children. That's what we do. The various heads of department that I worked with, you know, the principals, up to now, so many of them, I meet them and we can warmly greet each other because we knew that even when we disagreed, we came from it at a point was we want to be solution driven. How best can we help our children? Some of the resources we were able to pull together through COVID, Lisa, you know, that there are particular people I could call and say, I need hygienic packs for my children, be it corporate entities. You know, some of my friends saying, trust you to go asking who you need for what. And I'm like, yes, I need this. You're at a bank. How can I get this? You're at this department. How can you manage? So for me, it was a lot of that. It was a very difficult time, but it meant for me, I always like to think of COVID, we were resilient. We were resourceful. We were more empathetic to each other. We looked out more for each other. There are particular team members I worked with, and I know they went above and beyond. And it's not only heads of departments, it's the drivers who would have done things, the support staff at schools, you know, people that we don't necessarily turn back and say thank you to, but they were doing their best to make sure that things happened. So it was a difficult time getting back into the system. Many people know that the reason why I would have left, it's because when you leave a St. Lucian system, particularly when I started teaching, I would not have a gratuity. And so my pension would be with an NIS pension at the age of 65. I think that's public knowledge now, so I can say it, you know. And so these were the thoughts going through my head that, you know, I would continue working and sooner or later I would be needing that pension, I'd be needing that gratuity, and I would never qualify for one simply because the system had been changed. And efforts to regularize my my employment in that regard were not successful from my perspective. But it doesn't take away from the fact that there are individuals in the medical profession that I would message at 5 o'clock in the morning and get a response from. That there weren't corporate entities who came to my rescue and said, Fiona, we have 10 boxes of masks, pick it up. There weren't other corporate entities who said, we have tablets for your children. And I said, yes, give them to me. And we organized distribution quite transparent with education officers coming on board and being able to help. There weren't teachers who, you know, learned how to manage online within a short period of time and were there consistently trying to impart knowledge to families who, you know, we're trying to find out how does Zoom work? How does Google Meet work? You know, trying to make sure children who are vulnerable are not even made more vulnerable by the fact that they're losing out on so much school. So COVID was difficult, but I think that we can speak to having tried our best. I can speak to having tried my best alongside the various team members that I was privileged to have served under as well as with.
So do you think all of that experience you had internationally, you were able to, did that bolster you for you to be able to meet the challenges as you indicated that COVID brought, but also perhaps Fiona too, and I'm just wondering, the skills that you were, capabilities that you gained internationally, how did that really help you in being able to do things differently? Because COVID required a completely different way of thinking and getting things done. Yeah. So you felt very prepared when the challenge came?
I think that we would not have been very prepared at the start. But as we went along, I mean, I can publicly also mention my deputy chief, former deputy chief, Mr. Ragunanan Dawson. You know, the energies that were there, you know, and the willingness to work and the willingness to go the extra mile. So the level of preparedness wasn't necessarily there. I don't think it was there for anybody. But as we went along, we felt stronger. As we went along, we were able to engage more people. I do know that I was able to work with, you know, other agencies to look at how best do we manage this situation without looking at UNICEF's report coming out and saying, you know, if our children continue to be, you know, affected by COVID, they will lose out on so many years of learning, and coming back will be a great difficulty, you know. So a lot of it was...
Do you think we've been able to bounce back?
I mean...
I know you're outside of the system, but as an educator, you'll keep your pulse.
I know that we've been able to bounce back to a certain extent. I am very concerned about vulnerable children. I'm very concerned about the access to technology and sometimes the mismanagement of that, because I think COVID did bring that, where almost everybody and every family needed a tablet and you know, access to the online resources. And I don't know if we have managed it effectively enough that now it is a learning tool and not necessarily a distraction.
So within the COVID years, you know, as I said, difficult time, but you think, you know, it exposed the limitations that we had or still have within our education system. So speak to me about those limitations and how we can begin to do a sort of remedial work on it.
Well, I mean, the limitations were from, you know, the socioeconomic status of families and what one could afford and what the other couldn't afford, which meant that you had to find resources to try to balance that and to make it as equitable as possible. But COVID also brought out a lot of the vulnerable children that we have, you know, children who live in particular households where, you know, we're assuming everybody has a bedroom all to themselves, or at least a space, a safe space. You know, that wasn't necessarily the case. And we saw a rise in, you know, various situations of vulnerability of children being exposed during that time. Because yes, you have to stay home, but where do you stay home? What does that physical space look like?
Especially if you know there's abuse within the home.
Oh, definitely.
Physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, or all those forms.
Yes.
Like where, because school for most students, that's the safe haven.
And that is unfortunately all of the above. In as much as I would like it not to be all of the above, it was all of the above, which is why there was a push to allow for the safe reopening of schools, because we got to the point where we had to find care packages of food to give to various families, because we appreciate that the St. Lucian education system has a beautiful program, our school feeding program, awesome, where our children get a warm meal per day. And we have other schools that are able to find additional resources to give, and I'm thinking of Mrs. Shirley Lubin now, to give the children a small package to go home with. In the absence of that, a warm meal, some of our children were without food, and that's the reality, you know. And so the safe haven that the school is, it is not only about the physical space, it's not only about the academics that we want to instill upon them, it's not only about the sports that we want to, you know, have them participate in an extracurricular. It is also, you know, Maslow's basic needs, and the basic need being food and a safe place to be during the day, because we appreciated that during COVID, you know, having a family in a one-bedroom or two-bedroom place with 5 children and adults all around, what was a difficulty?
It was a lot. Now, you, as I said, you know, keeping your finger there on the pulse, you started a podcast on YouTube, and I tune in, I watch, and fascinating. And it's called Dr. Fiona Speaks. And on there, you were able to, you know, those very issues that you brought up there, and you are able to speak freely about those. Now, you speak about the challenges, what COVID exposed to Fiona. And we see how our young people, for the past year, you know, gang violence has, you know, certainly, it has crept up its ugly head. It has us really in that stranglehold, I believe, and the statistics show that, that, you know, even with our murder numbers above 70, that more than half of that is young people. And we're talking about young people from the age of young males from 15 to 25 to 30, just cut down in the prime of their lives. We now beginning to see a sort of a trend emerging where the young girls are also involved in gang life, and where, you know, in various forms, they also navigate. So once we were thinking purely of the male as being, you know, we move from just saying marginalized, but at risk, they've now endangered, really. And now the girls are also following suit, where we believe that our young girls were the ones who would be saved from the block and all of that. We're now beginning to see that's not the case.
Yeah. It is for me one of the saddest times when I have to listen to the news. And at times when I listen to the news, I hear a name and I recognize that name. I see an issue coming up, somebody has been killed, and I recognize that name. I hear a mother screaming, and I see the name, and I know that name, and I know that individual, and I know the circumstances. So that for me is really a sad time, a very unfortunate time. But here's what I think about all the time. I think that we speak to, you know, people being responsible. We speak to young people being accountable. We speak to young people having manners to do particular things. But where do they learn those things? Where are they taught those things? Who models those things? When do we applaud them when they have done? By quick, we have an example. I met this young man and he walked. He said, "Good day, miss." He doesn't know me. I greeted him and I thanked him for doing it.
Yes.
And he held the door for me.
You can see we went to Corinth.
We went to Corinth. We're Corinthians.
Yeah.
We're Corinthians. Because it is to say that if he had thrown the door in my face, I would have been upset. Oh, he has no manners. But when he does behave in a respectful manner, we don't. And, you know, I say, yeah, and you can look at it. You can look at the Facebook pages where, you know, something positive has happened and a school puts their children's issues up and they say, "Oh, let's applaud our children." You might have 10 likes.
Yes.
10 likes. But if there is something with a lot of curse words or inappropriate sexual content with children, I don't know, 20,000 views within a short space of time. So for me, we have to be held responsible. And I say we. Parents, I start with you. Parents, you have to be responsible. You have to model. You have to teach. You have to have that conversation. You must communicate. I'm a parent myself. It will not be perfect. It will never be perfect. And we make mistakes. But if there's a genuine love for children, if there's a genuine, I am going to teach you the way that I know best. I'm also going to learn how to do it better in case I make mistakes. So, I hear people speak about, countries like Singapore, and I've been to Singapore. But countries like Singapore didn't get to no chewing gum on the ground by just saying, please don't do it. They put in consequences. There were rules, and then the society became one where. So back to the crime.
So I'm liking that you say that, because
Yes.
this is something I say often. When we look at these model societies, whether it be Taiwan, we got Singapore, or some of it in Asia, the reality is that there is a national ethos.
Exactly.
That there is that one track mind that everyone has decided this is what it's going to be, and everybody gets on board that train. But we are democratic.
Well, I tell you.
Everybody and people have, the concept of democracy is that everybody do whatever they want, and it's my right. I ain't hurting nobody.
But
So
there's a
let me do my
collective,
thing.
Lisa. There is a collective. And that is what the society speaks to. Yes, you have your individual rights, but there's a collective. There are spaces that are public spaces, that experiences that are public experiences, and so we must appreciate that. I am driving down along the Rodney Bay area where there's a bus stop. It's always full of garbage. There's a Rasta gentleman cleaning up. By the following day, you have at least 10 plastic bottles. Drive past the Corinth Gap, the Marisil Gap. I don't know who you are, but I applaud you. Flowers aligning that bus stand, and somebody's just put a bag up, and you see people throwing garbage in there. I'm speaking about mindset. I'm speaking about a sense of responsibility. I'm speaking about very practical things that says, yes, we're speaking about big crime, but the crime starts with small activities where we do not comply. So when we throw in the garbage out of the window, when we drop in the bottle anywhere, when we, doing things, forget, we can't even go into traffic. So many things that we're doing, we know that are wrong. When it gets to the chance where we have to be violent, we will, because some of those little things have not been taken care of. We have not developed the sense of responsibility in doing those things. So breaking the law in a bigger way just becomes second nature. So we must have consequences, Lisa. And we must have consequences that are not necessarily only punitive.
Yes.
But
Or in the home, that you must pull out a strap and beat your child senseless in order for you to get your child to comply.
One look. There are mothers that will give a child a look. There are fathers who will look at their children. And somebody uses the example and says, my mother spoke to me with her eyes. Meaning she looked at me and I knew what I was doing was wrong. So it is to say that our children must learn from us what is acceptable and what's not acceptable.
But I always find too, Fiona, that the parent, and you said parents will not always get it perfect, and now our parents are younger, or some people say don't say that, because back then parents
I don't
were
know
like
that's
16
true,
and
actually.
18
Exactly.
But I find that parents today also want to pursue their dreams. They also have to get out there and work harder than maybe when my mother or my grandmother were there, and then they had more of that family support. You had that extended family that you could have relied on, and so forth. So things have changed in that regard, in what the family structure and what the support base is like. And then you have mothers and fathers who themselves are in their own prime, and they too want to still have the things that they like. They still want to go and hang with their friends, because they're at the age for doing so. And let's face it, that's how you are, ingrained. This is what makes you. So parents now, it's almost as if when people, you know, they have to say, boy, I'm a parent, so that means I have to begin to dress differently, think differently, speak differently, just become a totally different person. And I have met individuals who are, maybe they're not aware, but they almost resent that.
Okay.
And I don't know if maybe that doesn't translate into being a more effective and efficient parent. I don't know. I'm just posing the question to you because you are more, you know, of the professional on that.
I have seen it all around. I have seen single mothers go above and beyond for their children, attend every parent-teacher activity, be there at sports meets, be there at the school, even if it's $5 to contribute. I've seen it happen. So for me, I try not to generalize about families. What I can say is, my little 2 cents here, be careful who we choose to have children with, be it the males or the females, because when you have had this child, you have a level of responsibility. You can't just drop it. And
you eavesdrop on my conversations.
Yes, I did.
You eavesdrop on my conversations. I say this all the time. And I think the Bible says so as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, implanting the seed. You
Let's
have
be careful.
to be careful. So what does that? I know what I think when it comes to that, but let me hear you. And as someone you've had to deal with families, children, parents for 30 years. When you make that statement, what does that statement mean? Break that down for us.
That statement means, first you make the choice, be it male or female. If there is a situation whereby a child is here, there is a great level of responsibility. And I can tell you that of late, I have seen so many fathers, young fathers, like we say in St. Lucia, walking hands in hands. You all know where we say that? Holding on to their children, walking them to school, walking with them in castries, walking beside them. I have felt so good at those instances because I know our fathers get a bad rap, and sometimes some of them deserve to get a bad rap. But likewise, there's so many that are doing their best. So we want to encourage as a society. We want to give opportunities. And, you know, my favorite radio announcer this morning, Iowa, he was shouting this morning, hug them before they leave. Hug them. And I was like, yeah, I was reading my mind too. Hug them. Let them know you love them. And it is not the girls too. Hug the boys. Touch the boys. Touch their backs. Bless them. Say, pray with me before you leave home. Lord, I bless my child as he leaves.
Yes, speak power over your children.
Speak power. Speak positivity. Let them hear you. Affirm that you love them, you appreciate them, you value them. You also correct them, you know, and say something positive to them. They will smile and they will remember it.
You think that keeps them away from the block, away from the temptation of, you know, as we say, following bad company, being vulnerable to perhaps, you know, a gang down the street or a group up the road trying to reel them in?
I will not tell you it can do that 100% of the time, but I can tell you that the children who know that their parents are very concerned about them are less likely to find that level of support in a gang. Because the gang speaks to belonging. The gang say, come in, we value you, we appreciate you, you're part of us. But if you know that your mom, your dad, your grandmother, whoever, your guardian, your step-parents, your adopted parents are really wanting what's positive for you, it's a lot less likely that you will say, oh, I'll come and sit with you on the block. Because the block is not the place for you. There's food at home. There's a welcoming environment. There's a sense of belonging at home. We can appreciate that sometimes you've done everything that you possibly can or you think you have, and the children still choose something different. But similarly, I know of children who have grown up in parts of St. Lucia where, you know, all around them was mayhem and chaos. Yet, they rose to the occasion, and they're public figures. They are people who are contributing professionally to society. And one in particular you know, when he says, if I tell people where I come from, they're like, what? You came from this place? Yes.
And it's important to tell that story.
I
People
came
who are
from-
successful, it's important. And I, you know, Julian Alfred, in one of the articles written about her, she spoke so openly about hearing the gunshots outside her, you know, house and that sort, and how that within itself really gave her the encouragement, the impetus, the drive for her to want different and to be different and, you know, go above that sort of existence. But Fiona, the difficulties within the home, and then again, you know, the parents are concerned with putting food on the table.
Yep.
Many of them, you know, are perhaps even frustrated. And this is not for everybody, but, you know, there are people there, they're frustrated within their job. And it's like they can't move because it is what it is, and they can't find something else. And maybe the pay is not meeting the demands of the family, the obligations that they're supposed to service. When you have that sort of situation in a home, it makes it difficult for you to have that sort of harmony sometimes.
Yeah.
So I want you to speak to first the parents about how do they find that balance. Because you have the work frustrations, you have the frustration coming within for the bills, the children doing things, the school calling you, behave yourself. There's all of that. How does a parent cope in that space?
Well, I would think it is very much an individualized situation, but it can also be a collective situation. Here's what. We know that parenting in the most affluent of homes, in the most resourceful of homes, has its own challenges. I've seen families in, you know, very limited space with lots of love in there, and just looking out for each other and taking the guavas that are in the yard and blending it and making juice and making a squash that everybody will sit there and say, wow, what a lime squash that is. So I like to think of it that it can be both ways, but in the event of parents who are struggling, you know, there are support networks that help. There are various non-government institutions that help. Some people look to their churches, look to the school communities for that level of support. I would always say, please, you're having these difficulties. Don't try to do it all alone. If it is a confidant, if it is a good neighbor, if it is your pastor, reach out, because you need that opportunity to express. And sometimes there's more help than you think there is. You just have to be directed in the correct way. There are institutions that continue to support particularly abused individuals. Many times it is the female, but we know that gender-based violence also happens with males too.
As well.
So we have to appreciate that. So there are various systems to look to. I know that within our school systems, we don't necessarily, I say we still, the school systems don't necessarily provide counseling for parents, but they can also direct you as to where you can go to get that necessary support. So it is, please don't try to do it alone. No man is an island in this case. You know, if parents can pull their weight, grandparents, you know, other members of the community can give that support. We're trying to throw out, you know, the phrase, the village, it takes a village to raise a child. We're trying to throw that out because people don't necessarily want you correcting their child and helping. But I still think that it takes a collective to look out and to recognize when somebody needs help and to offer that help as well.
Do you think that the parents can turn to the children, and let me just qualify that statement in terms of opening up to their children? And I look back on my own example at school. I always knew that we couldn't afford all of the things that I sort of my friends have and that sort of thing. And I had a full understanding at my level of what my mom went through when she got pregnant, had me, and all of those, you know, those things that she went through. So she had to give up on her own dreams in order for me to be able to be at school and what have you. So my mindset at school was, I'm at school for two, myself and my mom. And that has always and still is what drives me. So is that important for parents, you know, once your children at that level so that they can have some understanding, they can,
Yep.
you know, internalize and you know, have some little analysis of their own, to speak to them openly and honestly.
Yep.
I think that if parents were to share stories about themselves, because, you know, we see adults, we see our parents, and we believe that, you know, they just came down like that. And I think sometimes parents forget that they too had to come up and they had to go through all of the learning curves the same way. But if we are able to have that open communication, then the children can see, okay, well, mom had that problem, dad did this, and this is how they were able to, you know, to come back on track. And I thought it was very helpful for me as a young person. I don't know if that may be something that can work.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you, and I think it's very important. I always have a bit of a smirk. Don't tell them I am, but I do. I have a smirk when I hear about child labor, particularly within sometimes the context of, you know, helping a family. I'm not speaking about children just being put to work under the farm, in the farms and all of that.
Yeah.
That's not what we're speaking about. But for me, it is important
I so like
that
to go
children.
with my grandmother.
Oh yes,
of course.
Oh yes, I went to the beach with my mom and sold T-shirts to tourists. I was in the shop too. My family, they have shops and mini-marts and bars and what have you. But I'm saying that it is important to have age-appropriate conversations. It is important to say, this is what we can afford. It is important to say, let us use the resources we have properly. You know, a friend of mine used to say he had a tenant and she couldn't pay her rent, but every Sunday she wanted to make macaroni and cheese lasagna. You know, she wanted to bake a rack of lamb, and she wanted this, and she wanted coleslaw, and she wanted, I don't know, fried rice.
Well,
you know?
one day in the week, no, like a king, like a queen.
No, we're going to make lasagna one day, and we're going to make macaroni and cheese another day, and we're going to stretch it because the resources aren't like available.
Yeah.
But that was a side joke, but it is to say that so many people can tell you, we went to school with our lime and our sugar and our water.
Absolutely.
And we enjoyed it. When we could afford to buy whatever else, we were. So I think age-appropriate conversations must be had. Teaching children to be part of the family. You know, you're doing basic chores. The children help and do a basic chore as well. They support in that way. They are aware that the shoe costs $100, you know, and so you need to take care of it. It's not simply buying them anything. And, you know, children are just taking tablets and just throwing it around. And I think, really,
so it gives them an appreciation for the things, and you have to know that you're working.
What's
you have
this?
to work towards
What's
getting
this level
something.
of responsibility? If, you know, I have a friend of mine, she'd say that her children run a lemonade stand, that was in Canada, yes, but run a lemonade stand to buy their first tablets, and they cherished it. Whatever it is, if it is to sell your icicles and then, you know, you finally get this thing, you will appreciate it a lot more. So, in as much as some of our parents are struggling, it is okay to say, we're going to do a little side job on the weekend because you're a teenager at secondary school, and you can go bag some groceries. You can go rake some leaves. You can go help do something to bring in the $100 that is going to be used for your transportation money. And there's nothing wrong in that, because it instills in you from quite young an age an appreciation for work, an appreciation for managing finances, an appreciation for what your parents have to go through to help you.
And I think it really fosters a closer relationship, you know, in the home between, because you get an appreciation from each person as to what they're going through and what you have to do to help mommy, help daddy, and what mommy, and you know, and when they see that you being a good little girl and a good little boy, the rewards come. The rewards certainly come. But I just want to mention that, you know, if you know, you were saying that, and just came to mind. There's a gentleman that I know, not a St. Lucian, the Caribbean national, but he has his children. They go to school and he's at work, construction. After school, they, you know, daddy goes to pick them up and they come in to help, and they learn a skill during the vacation periods. They're with him. because it's one way of him, because as a single parent, he's able to keep his eye on his children.
Keep them close.
They are getting to appreciate the value of work, and they are learning something that they probably perhaps otherwise wouldn't learn in the classroom. So when I see, you know, those things around the place, it heartens me because it really shows. And single dads can be awesome too. I just wanted to put that out there.
We want to make sure we applaud them.
Yeah, single dads. Single dads are very, very awesome. But you know, the youth at risk, the delinquency, truancy, that I'm hearing, Fiona, that's on the rise.
I don't know for sure with the statistics, but I do know that if I had a magic wand, if I could access the budget, I would ensure that we have truancy officers. In our case in St. Lucia, we have this awesome gentleman called Mr. Tutuyut, George Tutuyut. He knows I'm going to mention his name. He was our attendance officer, and I would have loved to have seen him train 4 people to do that, because he would have been the one for the entire island, basically. But what was remarkable about him is the families that he knew, the contacts he had, his knowledge of the laws in St. Lucia, so his ability to also represent with court cases, but more so his fatherly, you know, his embracing manner, his empathetic manner to help take the children off the streets, because truancy meant that for some people within the education system, they were not allowed to pursue it. It is the attendance officer who had the legal right. Obviously, the chief education officer does not fall under that, because she has the right, or he, in case there's a he, she has the right to look at the entire education system. But the school attendance officer was charged with that responsibility. And, you know, you see it. This is why I spoke to some teachers last week, and I said, you know, we can always complain about the system. We can always say what's not good about it, what other people should be doing to make it better. But here's what. I always think, gosh, Fiona, just do what you can within your limitations, within your set of experiences. So, again, a special appeal to the individuals who see children and who know that they're not going to school. You may not personally want to approach them, approach the family, but call the school, you know, engage in a neighborly manner. How are you doing? Is there anything you need? You know, sometimes children tell you it's the most basic of things. I don't have something to go to school. So sometimes the schools are able to provide that for them. So let them not be on the streets. It's not going to do them any good, and they will fall prey to all kinds of
But it's difficult to motivate. So, for example, a student who just defiant, just does not want to be in that classroom because for some reason being somewhere else is more attractive to them. How do you motivate students into learning, into wanting to excel, wanting to be their best? Because it doesn't always come naturally to people, you know. It
doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come naturally. But you know, sometimes the ones we think weren't motivated, we see them 15 years and they say, oh, Miss, you remember you said this.
Something has to give that spark.
The relationships. It is the relationships. You have individual teachers where other teachers will say, oh, I don't know what, we can't do anything with this child. And yet, one individual teacher comes and develops a relationship with that child, professional relationship, but is able to recognize, is able to value that child, is able to see what are the issues. Sometimes our children are, you know, they have issues from birth. They have issues that stem from infant school. And they're in the secondary school, and we see them as being defiant. We see them as, oh gosh, his behavior is atrocious. Yet, he is able to connect, she is able to connect with a parent, with a teacher rather, is able to connect with an individual. Because sometimes it's just, you know, there's some people we like more than others. There's some people we have better relationships with. Some people, their vibe, the way you treat people. Oh, you know, And we laugh about it all the time. The student will say, oh, me, that teacher never liked me. And somebody say, oh, she loved me. Why? Because a relationship has been built. So sometimes we have to stop and listen to Lisa. We have to stop and listen. What is the issue? And sometimes taking those few minutes to say, I appreciate who you are so much, so I will take my time to find out.
Yeah, because, it's not necessarily that most people talk at someone as opposed to talking to someone. And so I'm hearing you saying that we need to give our young people a voice.
Oh, definitely.
And we need to listen, even if what they're saying is not what we want to hear.
And we need to put the consequences in place for them. After we've listened, we have to also put the consequences. We have to also put the resources into them. I cannot leave this show without, every time I think we've had all these task force and big committees on, on children loitering castries and the issues surrounding that and access to business places. And unfortunately, the fights that will occur, people are getting hurt, people are getting injured. And at the same time, I keep thinking, gosh, year after year, what spaces do we have for them? Where are the public spaces for them? Where are the extracurricular activities that is going to help them develop a skill, learn a new sport, ensure that they develop particular things.
Yes, and don't stifle your children.
Come on.
You talk about extracurricular activity. At school, I was known as Madam Tutbagay. I was just in every possible club you could think of, and if there wasn't a club of something I was interested in, I wanted to start up the club.
Yes.
So you are right. And that really, and it helps with the academics as well.
Oh, most definitely.
Allowing children to find purpose outside of the book.
So you're talking about how do you reach them. You would not have known that a particular child was so awesome at playing the steel pan.
Yeah.
It is only when he or she is afforded that opportunity. And I want to say, yes, and some people did see my video. We applaud Julian Alfred. And we just saw how much she united our country, how she just made us shine. But it is those same situations when, oh, you're doing common entrance, how you're not going to play. Why are you going on the field? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Oh, you need to do this. You need to. And it is about trying to make sure we have that balance. Those opportunities, a child who's learning to play music, a child who's learning to dance, a child who's learning a sport, who's learning to be on the debate team, all of those experiences, us, our prefects, our drug-free club. Say, look at any bagay. Calling for, let's say, quadrille teams and what have you. Participating in almost everything. That is going to help that child develop their confidence. That will give that child an avenue to do something positive, to be applauded, to be recognized. And so we must as a society invest in, I'm looking at the Parish Center and I'm thinking, gosh, if I were to win the lottery, I would buy that property and transform it into an educational space for our children, that when they leave secondary school on an afternoon, the city offers a karate class, a boxing class, a debating team,
that is so important,
a crochet, learn to crochet, learn to do this, learn, something.
Because they're learning, it's a social place as well, so they learn some socialization skills and things. And you were talking, and I'm thinking, I remember, a quick joke, I remember that, I know you remember Mrs. Casabianca?
Oh, yes. Mrs. Dolor.
Mrs. Dolor, right, yeah, she moved on to Mrs. Dolor. And I remember that coming into class and, concerned that I was just involved in so many things. Apart from being in all of the clubs at the school, I was also on the National Youth Council, and then I was doing my radio thing, because at the time Radio St. Lucia had I was on youth programs, and I was just in everything. She said, but when are you going to find time to study? I'm like, but do you know this helping me study? Because I was able to learn things in each of those spaces, again, that the book, but then because of learning new things, and my abilities now began to expand.
And using it in a practical way.
I was able to absorb more of my subject areas, but also to heavily opinionated. Me, boy, you know what, Fiona? As a child, true story, I was kicked out of my preschool. Kicked out. I remember they called my grandmother.
Oh.
You know, when my grandmother came, because they had me in a corner, in the naughty corner.
Oh, no.
And I said, but why is she there? And, you know, the teacher pulled her aside and said, you know, we can't have her coming back because she's not listening to us.
She's
now
talking
what?
too much.
No, not talking too much. Debbie, why do you want us to sleep? That was my question. I don't want to sleep, miss. No, lie down. You must sleep.
Yeah.
And I didn't want. No. Perhaps a little explanation. I don't know. But, you know, I was a child. I always asked why.
Or perhaps another
Why?
option
Why?
for the
Yes.
children who don't want to sleep. Is there a quiet corner? Can you sit and read a book? Can you just relax? You don't necessarily want to sleep, but it's the quiet time. There are a couple pillows. There's a little blanket. Just rest for a while.
Why they threw me out?
Is it possible to go outside? Is there something, you know, to give? Because we just have to manage those situations. And do you know what's interesting, Lisa? You remember it up to now.
I remember it
You remember it.
because
It is
and again,
significant.
that is, I'm calling it now opinionated, but I was called rude back then, you see? And throughout my
Yeah.
school, you know, life, being called rude, and I would question authority, it's only because I just want to know why.
Yep.
Now, when I got to secondary school, got into the debate club. Thank you to Mr. Emmanuel Jokes, who introduced me to public speaking. Went on to be a great champion for the school. The debate team, great champion as well. I was able now to channel that, being able to streamline that, being able to understand that, yes, you may have your opinions, but
There
it
are
is
others.
how you get your points across. And so by participating in public speaking and the debate team, I was able to
Use that
refine
energy.
that and use that energy, redirect it into something more positive. And so, yes, we have to allow our children to participate in the extracurricular because there's a lot of
need it.
value in that.
They need it. And, you know, they go on to become awesome at things, you know. People are earning a living because they learnt music at school and they can take
And the
that
police
into a
band
profession.
is happier because
know,
lots of
course.
Corinthians.
Yeah, so you have all of these skills that young people learn early. Even language, learning languages, they tell you, yeah, give it to them very early on because then they have the capacity. They can build on it. It's not when you get to be an adult, you're trying to learn something. So for me, opportunities, our young people deserve that. I see them on the road and I'm thinking, oh, so many young people just standing around. So much time is wasted. For many parts of the world, you have a lot of activities. My own children did everything from volleyball to karate to self-defense. You know, you put them in particular clubs because they learn something and they can transfer it in their studies to real life situations. And I am hoping
And they get to
that
learn
we do
about
that.
themselves.
They learn, they learn about their skill, their talent.
You have to know who you don't get to know who
Yeah.
you are by simply, you know,
Yeah.
breathing.
Yeah.
You know, it takes it's a full blown process to
Oh,
get
most
to know who
definitely.
you are as an individual and what is your capabilities and how far can you extend what is your potential, how do you
skills.
unlock that potential yourself, because you don't always have to rely on someone else to unlock that potential for you.
Oh, most
You have to be self-driven. So that is one aspect I took away from
Most
that.
definitely.
But when you look at a mass, you know, we look at our situation, Fiona, and are we moving into 2025, as I said.
Please, God.
Yes, you know, when you look at the social, what we are socially, what is your fervent wish? Give us some, you know, some insight, some advice on how we could probably, you know, better our family life as, you know, as students, the education life, as individuals. How can we allow ourselves to continue to be driven and to pursue and to be honest in our pursuit as well?
Yeah. For me, my fervent wish is that our nation's children remain safe. I wish that parents would parent. I wish that our parents would use the tough love. We cannot continue to allow our children to go astray. The school, the teachers, the principals, administrators, they can help. But it is the primary responsibility of parents to nurture children. I wish that we would take those phones away from them. take those electronic devices. No way should young children be going to sleep with a tablet. That our children are at school and their phones are buzzing throughout the day because it's in their pockets. Of course they're going to be distracted. When adults go to work, they generally have to put their phones away while they're at work, yet our children have those stuck in their pockets throughout the day. And all kinds of content that are inappropriate are coming to them at that time. I wish that our fathers would just continue to hold the hands of our children. Fathers, I know that many of you do an awesome job and I applaud you for it. But you must continue to do so. Our boys need you. Our girls need you. Our entire society needs you. Because when we look at the statistics of the crime, particularly our young men, the last time I went to Body Lane, I was able to go into the section where, our young men were. 80% of them grew up without a father figure in the home.
Correct.
And they came from all schools, I tell you. They came from every school on island. So there is a lot to be done, but we cannot, just throw our hands up in the air and say, that's it. No. We do our little bit, like I like to say, in my neck of the woods. And some time ago I read, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. And if all of us do our bit in our family, the family extends then to the community. It extends then to our nation, St. Lucia. So we need to focus on our children, focus on how best we can support them. I appreciate, as an educator, that the school is pivotal to the development of our children, but it is not only the school's responsibility. We must work with them, even when we disagree, dear parents. Even when we disagree, keep the communication lines open. Know who your children's teachers are. Establish that rapport with them. And work to do the best that we possibly can for our nation's children.
Well, I could not have said it better. And you were speaking there, and Fiona had a flashback.
Yeah.
As the Tikakawat Form 1 student, and you at the mic at the General Assembly. So I had that flashback moment there, and let me just tell you, you don't look any different.
Oh, how sweet, thank you.
So back then, you don't look any different at all. So I really want to thank you. I know there's so much more that we can talk, and you have an open and standing invitation to come back anytime, because no way can we exhaust the discussion on the issues that are confronting us as individuals, as you say, as the collective, as the community, as a nation. And I do hope that you will grace me again with your presence, and not too long from now. I have been speaking there with Dr. Fiona Meyer-Segis. And I want you to tune into her podcast. When you see, go and look for Dr. Fiona Speaks. Subscribe, please subscribe, so that you can get the notification. I did it for you.
Oh,
is that okay?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Subscribe so that you can, get that notification, and so that you can hear from her at any time. And I think you have something like, is it about 60-something videos up?
Yeah, there are quite a few.
Yeah, it's quite a few. Trust me.
I'm speaking too much.
No. They are in bites. They're like in 5-minute bites, and so that's great. So just go on that channel, the YouTube channel there, and go ahead and listen to Dr. Fiona Speaks. I'm Lisa Joseph.
Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for coming. Thank you for watching, and I know I will not necessarily be seeing you again on this forum. So 2025 is approaching, and I hope that this conversation really, got you started in your thinking about what you need to do. We know we always go ahead and write down everything that we want, and the resolutions. So I hope that this conversation has kind of jolted you, and you are ready to write down those resolutions. And all we seek is just better improvement as human beings. Thank you so much. I'm Lisa Joseph.
Thank you.
See you next time.